I understand that many here are skeptical or non-believers, but I'm simply sharing my experience. I'm open to all perspectives. Perhaps there's a logical explanation, perhaps not. Regardless, here's my story. This began in 2019. At the time, I'm 18, had just started further studies in a medium-sized town in eastern France. My degree was quite niche, so there were only about 10 students in my year. I quickly became friends with two classmates, Antoine 19 years old and Karim 23 years old. We bonded rapidly, feeling like old friends within weeks. Our conversations spanned various topics, including beliefs and the paranormal. Though raised in an atheist household, I was more spiritually curious than strictly non-believing. Antoine was deeply into shamanism and New Age ideas, presenting himself as quite knowledgeable. I found his insights intriguing, even if I hadn't formed firm beliefs myself. Eager to explore, we decided to experiment. For Antoine's birthday, Karim gifted him a Ouija board. That evening, we gathered at Antoine's place, dimmed the lights, closed the shutters, and lit candles. It was a first for all of us, and while I was intrigued, I doubted anything would happen. Surprisingly, the planchette began to move. Antoine and I stayed silent while Karim led the session, asking basic questions like, "Who are you?" and "What's your name?" We approached it respectfully, without mockery. As the session progressed, my skepticism grew. I suggested it might be the ideomotor effect, our unconscious movements guiding the planchette. Karim proposed I remove my fingers and ask personal questions only I could answer. I did so, inquiring about a deceased family member. The board spelled out my grandfather's name, who had passed 2 years prior, a name I'd never mentioned to my friends. I asked more specific questions, and the answers consistently matched. Disturbed, we ended the session. I felt drained and slept deeply that night. We held more sessions, but over time, the responses became erratic and mocking. I began to suspect we were being deceived. Nonetheless, I believed we were communicating with something. Post-session, I experienced unsettling symptoms. Once, I nearly vomited due to intense chest tightness. I became irritable and unkind, even lashing out at friends. Karim later recounted an instance where I spoke to him harshly in class, a moment I couldn't recall. My mood swings concerned those around me. I attributed it to academic stress and the unsettling nature of our experiences. Even as a skeptic, I found myself uneasy in dark spaces. These episodes persisted for about 2 years, fluctuating in intensity. There were also external occurrences I couldn't explain. During a session at my home, Karim requested a physical sign from the entity. We heard distinct knocks on a wall with no adjoining rooms. In another session, upon receiving the word death as a response, a candle extinguished itself, only to relight after the session concluded. Karim filmed this incident. The footage likely still exists on his phone. Outside of sessions, I frequently saw fleeting shadows in specific areas of my flat, usually in the early afternoon. One afternoon, while cleaning, I noticed a woman in white staring at me from the street. She vanished when I looked again. Another time, while taking out the trash to the cellar, I saw a man in a hat near another door. When I turned to greet him, he was gone. Later research introduced me to the concept of the Hat Man. While eating and watching a series, a piece of bread beside me jumped several centimeters without any apparent cause. Nothing else moved, and my friends dismissed it when I shared the story. Over 5 years in that flat, I had 2 relationships. Both partners witnessed the bathroom door opening on its own, despite it typically closing due to the floor's incline. There were no drafts or open windows. One evening, a plastic water bottle near the bin toppled and rolled to my feet. I assumed it was due to air movement, though nothing else was disturbed. While cooking with my ex, the TV volume suddenly increased dramatically. The remote was on the kitchen table, away from the TV. The next day, the volume fluctuated again without anyone touching the remote. Karim and I once visited a church. He sat in the front row while I stepped outside. Watching from a distance, I saw him seated, but moments later, he exited the church without me seeing him walk out. After a visit, Karim found a rosary on my doorstep, which he nearly stepped on. 2 weeks later, another wooden rosary appeared on my doormat. I kept it and still have it. Engaging with the Ouija board led to 2 years of unsettling experiences. Despite periods of calm, the disturbances recurred. I've since distanced myself from such practices. Over time, Antoine returned to his hometown, and I lost contact with Karim. I've gravitated towards Christianity and haven't encountered similar disturbances since. I'm not asserting any absolute truths, this is merely my account. Some may view me as paranoid or delusional, but I believe placing my hands on that board was a mistake. If I have one piece of advice, avoid it, regardless of your beliefs. This happened almost a year ago in November. I used to live alone in my house, which is in a pretty isolated area where not many people live. At the time, I was really bored. I hadn't been talking to my friends much and wanted to do something a little exciting. That's when I saw the opportunity. I'd always been kind of fascinated by the idea of Ouija boards. I didn't exactly believe in them, but I still wanted to try it out and see what happened. I decided I'd do it around 2 a.m. I didn't have a board, so earlier that evening I made one after looking up designs online. I used cardboard to put it together. That night, I set everything up to begin. I was honestly nervous because it gets really quiet around here, especially at night. You barely hear anything, maybe a few insects outside, but even that is rare. I lit a candle, don't know why, just thought it'd add to the vibe, closed all the curtains and sat on the floor. The only light was from the candle, and the whole room felt heavy and silent. I moved the planchette and started asking questions, ones I got from reading about others' experiences. Stuff like, is someone here? I waited a minute, didn't see anything happen, so I asked a few more similar questions just to be sure. Still nothing. But the atmosphere itself was getting to me. The silence, the dim light, just the overall energy, it made me feel really on edge. And then the weird part happened. I was sitting on the floor facing the door when I suddenly heard the metal awl drop on it get banged once. Right after that, I saw something like a shadow from the light coming in under the door, like someone had just moved past. That moment scared the hell out of me. I immediately blew out the candle and stopped everything. That turned out to be a mistake. Now the room was pitch dark, and I couldn't remember where I'd put my phone. I got up and tried to find the light switch as fast as I could, but just before I reached it, I swear I heard footsteps, like someone ran in my direction for just a second. I was wearing socks, so I know it wasn't me making the sound. The moment I flipped the lights on, I found my phone and left that room to go lie down in my bed. I couldn't sleep after that, so I just scrolled on my phone until I felt tired enough to pass out. First thing the next morning, I threw the board away in the trash. I didn't want anything more to do with it. 2 nights later, I woke up in the middle of the night to find myself standing outside in the corridor. I might have been half asleep and walked out there on my own, but it was still a really strange thing to happen. I went right back in as soon as I realized it. After that, every time I went to sleep, I got the strong feeling that someone was watching me. That feeling stuck around for about a week. And even now, whenever I think back to that night, I get emotional, like actual tears in my eyes. It always makes me wonder, was it really just in my head, or did I mess with something I shouldn't have? Even if it was just a cardboard Ouija board. During my junior year of high school, I went to a party where the host eventually pulled out a Ouija board. At the time, I was really into paranormal stuff, but I didn't truly understand the dangers one of those boards could hold. We asked the usual silly questions, but then things took a strange turn. The room started to feel darker to me, like my vision dimmed, even though the lights were still on. Then came the question, how old will I be when I die? Everyone else got normal numbers. Mine? It just went back and forth between 0 and 1, back and forth, over and over. Someone finally shook the piece and said it was acting dumb. But it freaked me out enough to stop playing right then. Now, I've always had a strong sense for this kind of thing. I can often feel or see spirits. A few weeks after the party, he showed up during one of my classes. At first, it felt like comfort, like protection, almost familiar. But I would come to learn it wasn't like that at all. Strange things started happening at home. Drawers opening on their own, whispers, shadows moving, lights flickering where there shouldn't be any, books sliding off shelves. But it got worse at night. He would stand in front of my door, his presence radiating fear, and his shape would shift. I came to believe he wasn't just a spirit, he was evil. I dealt with it for a couple of years until I met my now husband. When we got our first place together, things ramped up. Keep in mind this was a small rental, maybe 400 square feet total. You could see the whole place from the living room. We started hearing footsteps, breathing, and whispers regularly. At the time, my fiancé was practicing Wicca and had blessed the home, but he didn't bless the porch or the outer walls. So we started hearing scratching and knocking on the windows and doors. Others saw him too. People described my attachment as a shadow figure, tall and built like a tank, and they always said he had a bad, heavy energy. He would always return to the room I was in. My husband tried to banish him, and it went badly. He worked late, usually getting home around 3:30 a.m. His drive took him along a notoriously haunted road with lots of accidents, right next to a big river. One night, he came home pale and drenched in sweat. I knew something had happened, but he didn't want to tell me right away. About a week later, he finally admitted what went down. That night, while driving home, his brakes gave out and he couldn't stop. He was going around 60 miles per hour, and suddenly the steering wheel started yanking toward the river on its own. He had to fight to keep the car on the road. It's a narrow, winding road, and he said it took everything he had to keep control. The next day, the brakes and wheel were perfectly fine. No problems at all. When he told me that, I knew something had to change. I figured, if something evil like that could exist, then something good had to exist too. So I took him to church with me, a place my parents had started going. I gave myself to God, told the entity it wasn't welcome anymore, and the activity stopped. For the first time in years, the house was quiet, peaceful. Even though I don't go to church much now, the quiet has remained. We don't live in that house anymore, and we've even moved out of state since then. But our current home is calm. The only visitor we get now is the spirit of our dog, Solo, who passed away last year and still likes to check in on us. From what I've gone through, I'd say this: don't mess with Ouija boards. It nearly cost the love of my life his.